Good morning, Red Group. We are on to Chapter 2. You've completely worked and finished on Chapter 1, so we are going to move on to Chapter 2 and go ahead and start our first section. This whole chapter is about rational numbers. We're going to learn a little bit more about that today. So your I can statement for today says that I can compare rational numbers and decimals. Okay, so our first vocabulary term, we have 3 new vocabulary terms today. Our first one says that a rational number, so you're going to write rational number, is a number that can be written as a over b, where a and b are integers and b cannot be 0. We don't want a fraction that has a denominator of 0, so that's why it says b can't be 0. So a over b is a fraction. Second one is a terminating. A terminating decimal is a decimal that ends. It's done. It terminates, it's over, it's finished, we're done with it. Okay? Just as over. However, a repeating decimal is a decimal that has a pattern that repeats. So a lot of times in your calculator, you might see something that looks like this, and it will have a whole bunch of 6s, and at the end it turns into a 7. That is also known as a 0.6 repeating, because this 7 is actually has been rounded to raise up to the next one, but it really is 0.6 repeating. So many of you will say, but it says it's 0.6666667. Well, no, it's not. It is really 0.6 repeating, but it just rounds it. So here's your example here. Let's see. Oh, I want to clear that. 2/3, for example, is that. It's 0.666. It keeps going on and on and on and on and on, and then it goes into 7. Okay? So 0.6 repeating to the 7. So be careful just to know that that's why it's rounded to a 7. So we'll look here, and it says that our rational numbers, this is the huge giant circle of rational numbers. Rational numbers are anything that we can write as either a fraction, integer, a whole number. A natural number is just like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's our numbers that we already know. Integers can be negative. Rational can be written as a fraction. Irrational numbers, those are the numbers that are never, ever, 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 ever going to stop. They just go on and on forever. Okay, so those are a little bit different, like pi and cube roots and square roots. They're not always just come out the same. So those are a little bit trickier, but we won't talk about those. So here's your step-by-steps. It says when ordering rational numbers, first, turn them all into a decimal. It's easiest if they're all in a decimal. It's easier to compare all of them if they're decimal. Then you're going to place them in order as they would appear on a number line. When you're turning a decimal into a fraction, if a 0.1, it's 1 over 10 because it's one spot. Remember, if it's one spot, that's 1 0. 0.01 or 1/100th is 1 over 100. That's exactly what it says. If we read these with the correct place values, you will actually say the fraction with it. 1/100th. This one has 3 place values, so it has 3 zeros. 1 over 1,000. So, for example 1, over here, it says write the rational number as a decimal. Okay, these can be kind of tricky. So I'm going to break it down into 2 parts. You can see it here. I'll zoom in a little bit. There we go. Okay. You have 2 parts here. You have a whole number, and then you have this fraction. Your whole number stays a whole number, so it's going to stay right there. However, the 4 over 5, I'm going to teach you guys just to go ahead and divide it. So I'm going to zoom back out here. I'm going to just have you divide. Just do 4 divided by 5. What's that equal? That equals 0.8. Sorry, our calculator's broke right here. So this is actually where you're going to add the rest of it. 0.8. So here's your original, your normal number, -3, because that's a whole number. And your fraction turns into a decimal, which is just 0.8. And that's all you have to do. So this is equal to a -3.8 because the negative sign stays there. That's it. That's as simple as it can get. Now, 5/30, a fraction bar really means dividing. So let me just do 5 divided by 30. Look at that. It's 0.16. And what do we notice about the 6? Goes on and on and on. It turns into a 7, which I told you before is just that it rounds it up. So this is 1.16 repeating. And just the 6 is repeating. Notice how the bar, my repeating bar, doesn't go over the 1 because the 1 doesn't repeat. Just the 6 does. That's very important that you don't put it over the whole thing. It's 0.16 repeating, not 16 repeating. Okay, so be careful of that. I would like you to go ahead and try number 3 on your own. Remember that this stays on its own and then this has your decimal. Your whole number stays, then you have a decimal. So I'd like you to pause this, raise your hand, so that I can double check that you're doing it and you're understanding it. So go ahead and pause it, wait for me to come by and check your answer for number 3. All right, you should be coming back from already getting it checked with me, but just as a refresher, I will go ahead and finish it off for you. So your -8 comes back over and still stays as a -8. I do 3 divided by 15 to get my decimal, and that's going to go over here, which is just 0.2. So -8.2 should have been your answer, and you should have your work shown, and you should have already got it checked by me. Okay? Nice job. All right, we're almost there. One more example. One more set of examples. Now, this was taking fractions, turning them into decimals. Now we're going to work at decimals and turn them into fractions because I know how much you guys love fractions. So we're going to turn this in. Now go back, and if you look back, you will see that I underlined how many place values and how many zeros there were. This is going to help us to turn these into fractions. So we'll notice that for this first example, we have 1, 2. We have 2 place values. So I'm going to write it as 55 over, what number has 2 zeros in it? Right here, 100. 2 zeros, 2 place values. Okay? Then I can simplify it. I know that there can have 5 in both. So I would have 11 over 20, and that would be my final answer. Okay, because I know that 5 can go into both of those numbers. So then for example 2, you will see that there are 3 place values. So I'm going to rewrite this number as my numerator, so 125, and I'm going to take these place values and put that many zeros under it. There's 3 place values, so 3 zeros. So 125 over 1,000. Okay, now I know this, and you won't know this off the top of your head, and that's okay. But I know that I can divide top and bottom by 125, which would allow me to solve and simplify this down to 1/8. If you give me this answer, I'm okay with that. Okay, I'm okay with you just turning it into a fraction without simplifying it right now. We'll get to simplifying more later, but if you got to this point, I will accept that. Okay, this is just extra. You can get extra credit for that. This next one is similar to this one up here, where we have a 5, which is a whole number, and then we have our decimal. So our 5 remains our 5, and I have 1, 2, 3 place values, so I'm going to put 3 zeros under it. So it'll be 1,000. Alright, good job. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I can simplify this. I can simplify it actually by, I think I can simplify it by 125 again. Let me double check. Yep. So I can divide by 125. Again, this is just extra. It's okay if you don't know how to do that. And 7/8. So 5 and 7/8 would be my answer. All right. We're going to try a couple more of these. I'm going to have you go ahead and turn this into a fraction. Remember, there's 2 values at the bottom, so how many zeros will go under it? One will go on top. This one will not simplify, so this will be your bonus question, and once you get that, raise your hand and I'll check you off for completing your notes. You do have some homework, so make sure you complete your homework today. And make sure you're reviewing these notes as much as you need because it does take some time to get used to this. I did mention over here that when you're trying to put them in order, if it gives you a bunch of different ones and you're trying to put it in order, turn them all to a decimal. Just divide out the fractions so that they're all into decimals so you can put them in the correct order. And I can help you on that as well. All right, welcome to Rational Numbers and Decimals for Chapter 2. We'll continue to work on this. Raise your hand if you have any questions. Good job.